Welcome back. Happy 2021, Richard.
Here we are.
Our first podcast of 2021.
That's right. Here we go.
So what that means for certain is that we will spend the next month writing 2020 instead of 2021 on everything that we have to date. Hopefully.
I'm already forgetting to write 2021. Will Smith had a funny, I think you techies call it a meme, M-E-M-E. And he wrote 2020 W-O-N. So that's how everybody, I think 2021. So we'll see what happens in 2021.
That's right. So, that's right. Well, today we're going to, there's so many things to potentially talk about today because, it's the new year. It's, everybody was anticipating and looking forward to the new year to get 2020 behind us, to not have to hopefully move into the new year with renewed vigor, with renewed hope and expectation and everything. And as we wrote in our column this past week, there wasn't anything magical that happened the night of December 31st as the clock struck midnight. There was no fairy dust. There was nothing that happened that automatically changed everything. So, as we sit here today, some of the same concerns and everything that we've had for the past almost year now, continue with COVID and with everything else. And I think that we have to start preparing though for some things that we've been alluding to over the past few months. But I think that they are really arriving now. Now that the holidays are over, we're going to be getting back to school within the next couple of days. And it looks like we have some really critical benchmarks to think about over the next couple of days.
Yeah, we're still very much in the middle of this thing. It didn't end with the election. People were saying, well, after the election, this virus will go away. And that didn't end. It didn't end December 31st, as you say. And also, we worried about schools reopening, and there was no surge with the schools reopening. And we have a vaccine. Everybody's encouraged about the vaccine. So, and it's 2021, it's a new year. So it's a lot of hope. And yet this pandemic is still very much with us. And so while there's renewed hope, and we hope that the vaccine will work and everything's going to get better, right now things are getting worse. In an earlier podcast, we talked about COVID fatigue. One of the things we want to do here, in fact, one of the things we want to do with these podcasts is to explain why people do why we do the things that we do.
Right.
And so today is one of those days where we want to talk about why are people becoming careless at a very time when there's a surge, and part of it is the holidays, part of it is we're tired, part of it is the new year. So there's a lot of factors coalescing now that are causing people to become more careless at a very time when the virus is worse, when the numbers are getting worse. Okay, and so we want to talk about what are the contributing factors to this, what seems like our idiosyncratic reaction. Things are getting worse. You're more susceptible, and yet people are becoming more careless. Okay, in an earlier podcast, we talked about COVID fatigue. That we're all tired of wearing masks. We're all tired of washing our hands. Do you still wash your hands for 20 seconds? You don't have to admit that, but people said, oh yeah, that's right. We're supposed to be washing our hands for 20 seconds. People have forgotten. We're tired of social distancing. We're tired of, in the South, fall is football season, especially college football season. It's a huge tradition here in the South. And that was missed. That had to be missed. The entire football season was turned upside down. Also, the winter holidays were, had to change. And so we're all tired of this stuff. We were all asked to stay home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and many people didn't. and people kind of went shopping and went out and had dinners and got together with friends. So just about at a time when we thought we were getting to the end of this thing, a new virus pops up,
Right.
the mutant form of this virus. We don't know much about it. Is it more contagious? Is it more virulent? In 1918, in the 1918 pandemic, the mutated form of the virus was more virulent than the original form of the virus.
Right.
Is this one going to be? We don't know that. When will it even respond to the vaccines?
Right.
We don't know. And then there's this whole issue of hospital capacity.
Right.
Did you know about that? I didn't realize.
Yeah, I mean, many of the hospitals are reaching their capacity, especially in big cities and big metropolitan areas.
Right. And I didn't know that 10% was capacity. It's not that 10% is capacity, it's that if 10% of the hospital beds are occupied by COVID patients, then that hospital system is starting to get overwhelmed, and they have to implement surge strategies, which are tents and staff, and they have to go into sort of a crisis mode.
Right.
If 10% of the bed, so that's all it takes. When we talk about overwhelming the system, it only is a 10% occupancy rate that overwhelms the system.
Yeah, and a lot of the states are already over that.
Right.
And some are even worse, where some states, but also even some specific cities, are well over that 10% marker. And it's only looking as though those numbers are going to continue to grow.
Right. Yeah, because, you said 18 states are above 10, 7 states are above 15, and 2 states, North and South Dakota, are twice that. They're above 20%, and El Paso's at 40%. So we had heard about El Paso, we had heard about Los Angeles, but hospitals are overwhelmed with just a 10% COVID occupancy rate. So while we have hopes for the new year, things are getting worse. And they're getting worse because of COVID fatigue. And the other thing we want to talk about, the new contributing factor, is something called psychic numbing.
Right.
And you already knew about that, didn't you?
A little bit, yeah. And as you said a little bit ago, we've talked before about psychic numbing, about COVID fatigue, and how we are just kind of getting tired of all of this, tired of wearing masks, tired of washing our hands, tired of social distancing, tired of being told you can't go here, you can't do this, you can't do that. We're just, so many people are tired of the restrictions, and because they're tired of it, they're loosening their behaviors. They're you can go into the grocery store now and people are not wearing masks. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I looked down an aisle, and the aisle was packed with people. And so, I, of course, went to the next aisle. I normally, maybe over a year ago or so, I might have gone down that aisle anyways and just kind of weaved my way through, but, trying to be mindful. So people aren't, they're not doing many of the things that they're supposed to be doing. And it's that fatigue that we've talked about in previous podcasts.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit like inhibition, like people who try to lose weight and they talk about late night eating. You have all this inhibition during the day. You can stay on your diet in the morning and the afternoon. The nighttime comes and you've used up that day's quota of inhibition and you go into a feeding frenzy at night. And it's sort of the same thing with this, is you just wear down, you just get tired. Okay. So that's COVID fatigue.
Yeah.
But we want to talk today. So that's still with us. COVID fatigue is still with us. Today we want to talk about psychic numbing, another psychological phenomenon that's contributing to the carelessness. I think it's contributing to the carelessness that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's similar in some ways to the COVID fatigue, but this is a little bit more generalized. And it's more generalized, but it's also more intrinsic to the individual, and it's sort of this, I guess it's this phenomenon where things start to have less meaning, and, and it's not, things aren't as significant in good or bad ways, really.
Right.
It can get to the point where it's in good or bad ways. And so, we talk about feeling numb physically, like if something happens and we have numbness in our hands or arm or something. But psychic numbing is when there's sort of this psychological numbing of how you feel in your overall, interactions with the world.
Right. Yeah, and it comes from the enormity of the experience. Once numbers get so big, they start to lose their meaning,
Right.
and they stop having an emotional effect on us, and they think it's because it's a protective mechanism that we just get numb. After a certain point, you just get numb, and you say, "I can't do this anymore," and you just get numb. But the statistics are sobering. More people are dying every day of COVID than died in the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Right.
And we're still fighting two wars, like 17, how many years later? 18 years later. We're still fighting wars over what happened that single day.
Yeah.
But more people are dying every day. 2019 had the highest death toll in the history of the United States. And it was because of the contribution of COVID-19. There could be another, by the end of the year, when they count everything up, there could be another 3.2 million deaths in the US in 2019. And then every 38 seconds, 94 Americans test positive and one dies. And to put that in perspective, USA Today did an article. 58,000 people died in Vietnam, 117,000 in World War I, 407,000 in World War II. I don't, of course, we don't remember World War II, but I remember my parents talking about it. And virtually every family, most families in the country were affected by World War II. We only lost 4,000. I mean, some countries lost 20 million or 10 million people during that war, which is, to me, is incomprehensible. But 407,000, we're quickly approaching the death toll of World War II, which was a massive undertaking and affected almost every family in the country. This was the most striking, however. The current death rate is equivalent to 8 passenger planes crashing and killing everyone on board every day since mid-March.
Yeah.
Now, when one plane crashes, it's big news.
Right.
We have 8 crashing every day. That's psychic. No, it just, the numbers just overwhelm you.
Well, it reminds me of being in shock. Like when you become injured, if if somebody's in a car accident or something and they suffer a significant injury, they may not feel it at all. They could be standing there and they have a horrible injury and not even seem to feel it in any way. And be completely calm and everything. That's sort of a physical shock. Your body releases those opiates and endorphins so that you can be cognizant of what's happening around you despite a mortal injury. This is sort of the psychological equivalent of that. This psychological shock is so great and so massive that it's like we don't even allow ourselves to process what it means. 300,000 people. What does that even look like? It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, you think of 8 planes crashing every day. How do your brain can't even wrap itself around those numbers. I mean, and they begin to lose meaning, and therefore you just get numb to it and you just forget. You just say, you kind of throw up your hands and say, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, it's almost like Seligman's idea. What was that?
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Right. Yeah, like that fish, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't go past the glass.
Right.
I love that experiment.
So and the big as we're moving forward with this, one of the reasons that this is even more concerning is because, as we said, we just got through the holidays, and there is a concern that because of the COVID fatigue and because of the psychic numbing, people have been loosening their tendency to follow some of the safety precautions and everything. And we don't know what's going to happen by mid-January as it relates to numbers, because I know that I have seen large groups of people gathering together, some with masks, some without masks,
Right.
to celebrate holidays and to do different things. And so we have no idea what that's going to look like over the next month or two.
Right. We know that Thanksgiving, there was a surge after Thanksgiving.
Right.
We don't know what the surge yet is. We'll know in a couple of weeks if it went up. But that's what we want to try to understand is what's going on. Why are people loosening at a time when the numbers are going up?
Right.
And Los Angeles is, I think, a perfect example. That Los Angeles, as all of you who are watching the news know, it is the nation's hotspot. And yet, the police arrested people. There were 158 people at an indoor party
Right.
in over the holidays, and we still have people who are arguing, I shouldn't have to wear a mask. I shouldn't have to take these precautions. I shouldn't have to be told what to do.
Right.
And this is because we think because of psychic numbing. Joseph Stalin, one of those hated rulers, Hitler, Stalin, etc., made the comment one time. He said, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." And this is a guy who knew about millions of people dying. And it was, for him, a million deaths is just, he killed as many Russians as the Germans did during World War II. But psychic numbing is defined as a lack of feeling associated with information. The meaning of the information that you get is heavily determined by the feeling that the information creates in us.
Right.
So if the information creates in us this numbness, then we don't act on the information.
Right.
Okay? And this concept was first coined by Robert Lifton. He was a physician at City University of New York, and he interviewed Hiroshima victims, survivors. And they, one of his questions was, how do you comprehend the enormity of this? And they described to him this numbing, this feeling that they were just shutting down, that mentally their minds, their feelings were just shutting down. And he thought of it as sort of, it seemed to him like a sort of defense mechanism. He was a psychiatrist by training. And so he knew about defense mechanisms. And he said, given these enormous catastrophes, the brain seems to have this capacity to shut itself down, and you stop feeling the emotions.
Yeah, and we've talked before about this, the importance of language, right? We've talked about, the way that we label things and how important that is. And we talked about, our limitations in expressing things and talking about how we feel and processing some of those things based upon language. And so, so it would make sense that if we reach a point where the words or the statistics or the numbers or whatever reach a point where they just are so great that we can't really appreciate it. Like I think about that too when we talk about like the stimulus bill, right? We'll just say it's $1 trillion. I have no idea what $1 trillion looks like. So to me, it's like, okay, that's a lot of money, but and then they show you you see those graphics where $1 trillion is like $100 bills on pallets that fill a
airplane hanger.
And then you start to get a better idea. But again, when we're talking about some of these numbers related to COVID, and I think that the other piece to it is that we don't have any control over that. We don't have any ability to do anything about it.
Right.
We do, but it's sort of that the negative example, right? You're proving a negative, or you're trying to prove something by showing that something's not happening.
Right.
Face masks work because you're not getting sick. Well, I'm not getting sick, so why do I have to keep wearing my face mask? It's this argument that we have with ourselves that leads to us making poor decisions.
That's right. Right. Well, with psychic numbing, there are two issues at work with psychic numbing.
Right.
One is the way we think. The one is the way our brain works.
Right.
It's called fast versus slow thinking.
Mhm.
And the other is that our concern doesn't increase as the number of people affected increases. So when we talk about psychic numbing, we're talking about two issues that work together. The first is fast and slow thinking.
Right.
And I remember when this happened, this Daniel Kahneman, he was an economist who came up with this idea that of fast and slow thinking. And he said sometimes people people make decisions that are not necessarily in their best interests. You know, we used to, there was a time we used to think that people always made a decision based on their best interests. And it was Kahneman who said, no, sometimes they don't. During elections, you will often hear people say, well, she should never vote for a Democrat because it's not in her best interest, but yet she does. Or he should never vote for a Republican because, but they do. And so it was Kahneman who came up with that idea. And the experts in psychic numbing adopted this concept of fast and slow thinking.
Right.
And Kahneman said there are two ways to think. One is fast, intuitive, and emotional.
Mhm.
That's one way we react. The other is slow and logical and more thoughtful.
Right.
And he said, we always use both. Every individual uses both kinds of thinking. And what we have to do is learn how to use them appropriately, how to apply them in different circumstances.
Right.
Slow thinking is what we did in school.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we learn when we get
Right.
when we get degrees. It's that sort of logical.
Right.
You know, you gradually build on a body of knowledge, and it takes time and effort. And you know, I think like mathematics. You know, you start with counting and you work your way up to calculus.
Right.
But there's this very gradual accumulation of information. That's called slow thinking. And you take information and you're very deliberate. It's the sort of stuff that we hope that our political leaders are doing, that they're taking information and they're sitting in meetings and slowly and deliberately analyzing that information, coming up with a decision.
But it's not something that we do very often or very willingly because it's hard.
Sorry.
You know, when we think about just talking to someone, you know, when you're talking to someone, you hear the first maybe 25 to 50% of what they say. And then the rest of the time that they're talking, you're thinking about how you're going to respond because you want to respond immediately. You're not really taking the time to think about and to process what is being said. And you're trying to respond immediately. And so this slow thinking is very academic, and it's something that we tend to not do as often as we probably should.
Right, because it's hard, because it's slow. And you're right, that's really a good analogy because, you know, I think of spouses or partners or family members. I mean, it happens in families where once you get into a debate or an argument, you're thinking more about what you want to say and the points you want to make, and you're not listening to the information you're getting. And it's happening at a very emotional level. And that's fast thinking.
Right.
And but he said, and fast thinking is that it's based more on how we feel. And to manage COVID,
right,
we need to use the slow type of thinking. We need to gather the information, gather the data. Masks are a good example. We were told early on that a mask should have 3 layers. You know, but if you're not concerned about this stuff and you don't take the time to inform yourself, you'll wear a bandana that's one cotton layer. A bandana doesn't do any good. You know, a single cloth layer isn't going to stop these molecules. The spaces are too big. And so that decision requires slow thinking, but many people used fast thinking. So to manage this virus, we have to use slow thinking and carefully make decisions that are based on, guess what, scientific inquiry. You know, what information do you use? You have to use the science that we have.
Right.
And that was one of the big controversies during this whole thing, is that the scientists were getting pushed aside, and other people were directing this thing who didn't have the accurate information. So we were getting inaccurate information for a long time.
Absolutely.
So one issue is how fast versus slow thinking.
Right.
And the other is the additive effect.
Right. Yeah. The idea that just because there are more people experiencing something, or just because there are more numbers, doesn't necessarily equate to more concern.
Right.
And in fact, it's almost the opposite in many ways. The more
Right.
people that are affected by it, the more likely we are to, kind of pull away from it and become less interested or less concerned about it.
Right. Right.
But I think time is an issue too. But
What is
time?
time? Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was really significant back in March of last year. March and April, everybody was really concerned and everything. But as the numbers, but also as time passed, we become less. It's like, again, that learned helplessness. What are we going to do about it? 300,000 people is a year. What are we going to do now?
Yeah, many people are giving, there's a group of people who are still angry about this whole being told what to do. I mean, they were at the beginning, and there's a whole group of people that are not going to wear masks. They don't believe in this. They think it's a hoax. But they've been with us since the beginning.
Right.
But I think the majority of people fall into this category of fatigue and numbing, where they're just tired and overwhelmed by it all. And they're feeling helpless. They say, there's nothing I can do anyway. If I'm going to get it, how do you explain the infection patterns?
Right.
Why are some people getting it who do everything right?
Right.
And other people do everything wrong and they're not getting it.
Right.
And that's that learn say, well, what difference does it make?
Right.
I might as well just you kind of throw up your hands and say, it doesn't matter what I do.
Right.
I might as well go ahead and go out and enjoy a dinner somewhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's distressing, and in some ways it makes sense. You can completely appreciate where a person would feel that frustration.
Right.
But it's on the other hand, it's the thing that I always think about is, like when I wear my mask, I'm not wearing my mask for me. I'm wearing my mask for everyone else. And so, it's we have to keep in mind some of those social aspects of it, the sort of the public health aspect of it, that
mm-hmm.
it's not just for me.
Right.
I want to be healthy. So I want everybody else to wear their mask, but I want everybody else to be healthy. So I'm going to wear my mask.
I think everybody in the country, I'd like to know, I was going to write it, has gotten out of their car, gone toward a store, remembered just before you get to the door of the store that you forgot your mask, and you have to go back to your car to get it.
Right.
We've all had that experience.
Right.
What gets you, and you're tempted to go in and just say, to heck with it. Right? Mm-hmm. But you go back to your car, and what takes you back to your car to put your mask on? To me, like you, I don't know whether I have this disease or not.
Right.
And we're not going to know for several days.
Right.
After getting it. I don't want to take the chance that I might be infected and that I might infect somebody else. Okay. Right. You're right. That's what gets me back to last thing I want to do is turn around and go back to my car and get my mask. But I do, because I don't want to put anybody else at risk.
Right.
But again, if you're tired, if you don't have any inhibition, if you're worn down by this thing, you say, heck with it. I'll just take a chance.
Well, and that is the epitome of fast versus slow thinking, right? Fast thinking is, well, I'm just going to go ahead and get it done real quick. Mm-hmm. Versus slower thinking, I need to go back and get it. It takes a little bit more time,
right?
More labor intensive, but
right. Yeah, you got to do the calculus. You say, well, am I going to come close to people? How many people are in there? I had to leave the house very early this morning to pick somebody up. And I had to get gas. There were no cars in the gas station. There was nobody in the store. I got to the door, didn't have my mask. And I thought, there's nobody in there. But no, that's fast thinking. Oh, there's nobody in there. I can sneak in and sneak out. That's fast thinking. Instead, I went back to slow thinking and said, no, it doesn't matter. Let me do what's right for whoever might be in that store. There were no customers in there, but there was probably a clerk. Yeah. As it turned out, the door was locked and I couldn't get in anyway. But again, that's a good example of fast. That's a really a good example of fast and slow thinking. Is what decision you make, and as you're ready to walk into the store without the mask.
Right. Yeah, and we have to work hard to not be negatively influenced by the numbers. The numbers are ridiculous. I mean, they're soaring, and we have to be mindful that that they are real. You know, those are real numbers, and those are real people. And,
Yeah, those are families and people. Yeah, right.
and we just have to be vigilant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because we know that people around it, we know that everybody's getting a little bit careless. We know that we did that during Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we're all watching it, and we resent the people who aren't being safe. You know, there's all that resentment that is built up, but we're tired, we're angry, we're frustrated, and but we lose energy, we lose inhibition, and we stop wearing masks, and we start going out more, and we stop washing our hands for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But we're also spreading the virus by doing that. I mean, that much is clear, that if we don't do these things, you're probably going to spread the virus. So, but at least we understand we have an explanation for why we're feeling the way we feel. It's perfectly normal, it's perfectly human. It's the way the brain works in these kind of situations. But be cautious, be careful.
Yeah, just be mindful of it. And again, as we're moving into the new year, you know, let's remain vigilant. Yes, there's hope, but we have to be vigilant until it arrives. You know, the vaccines are very, very hopeful, but we have to keep it up until they get here.
Yeah, because remember, the Pfizer vaccine is in 2 doses. I guess there are some vaccines coming that are 1 dose, single dose. But so even if you take the vaccine, you have to wait 3 weeks. Well, you better wear a mask and be careful for that 3-week period. And we don't know how long the vaccine is going to last. So we still have to be cautious even with the vaccine. We should be able to get over this mountain sometime during 2021. But the first half of 2021 is going to look pretty much like 2020. Absolutely. So let's be careful, continue to be careful, and watch out for fatigue and numbing because they're ever present right now.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, good luck and stay vigilant. And I think that's it then for today.
Welcome to 2021 together. Right.
Here we go. Okay. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.